With part 4, we now come to the final stages of this journey. The overarching question was why the Arayot laws are introduced with a statement to the effect that Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Early on we rejected the introduction option. We also found fault with the accountability aspect in that this should follow, not precede, the obligation. Rashi's first option was that the Ani Hashem Elokeichem is a request, that just as Bnei Israel accepted mitzvot at Har Sinai, they should also accept the set of gzeirot that were to follow. The shortcoming of this option was that it is built on an assumption that gzeirot do not equal mitzvot. This assumption is shaky at best, and for this reason Rashi introduced a second option, returning to the accountability factor and justifying the Ani Hashem coming before the Arayot laws on account of the fact that within the Arayot laws there was one particular prohibition that stands out from the others, and that is the prohibition against intermarriage. The severity lay in the fact that the consequences result in a nituk, in addition to the fact that historically this proved to be a very difficult demand for the people to abide by, as witnessed with the events recorded in Sefer Ezra. Which brings us to the second stage of the multiple options rule, and that is identifying the shortcomings of this second option of nituk, for which there is a need to retain the first explanation for the Ani Hashem Elokeichem, that it is a request, that in addition to accepting the mitzvot at Matan Torah, they also accept the gzeirot that were to follow. The shortcomings of option 2 by now should be quite apparent. Firstly, if we are to argue that the Ani Hashem Elokeichem precedes the obligation on account of its severity, a severity that is reflected in the nituk, the disconnect that comes as a consequence of the violation, then the actual textual basis for that nituk, which as we pointed out does not apply to the Arayot in general, should have at least been recorded with the Arayot. In reality, we first hear of this prohibition in Sefer Devarim Perek Zayin. The second aspect of the Ani Hashem Elokeichem comes on account of the difficulty the nation as a whole had with respect to maintaining their ethnic identity. In support of this assertion, Rashi refers us to the situation that Ezra faced upon his return from Bavel, so that in effect what we are saying is that the statement of Ani Hashem Elokeichem recorded in Vayikra 18:2 is not referring to the present generation, but to a situation 1,000 years hence. This is the shortcoming of linking the Ani Hashem Elokeichem to an accountability factor, and for this reason Rashi retains the explanation that Ani Hashem Elokeichem comes as a request that Bnei Israel accept the gzeirot. The third component of the multiple options rule is understanding the value judgment that Rashi makes regarding the first option, the request, over the second option, the accountability, witnessed by the fact that it comes as the first option. And for this, Rashi, whose mandate is to explain the pshuta shel mikra of the text, needs to evaluate which of the two options is more aligned with the pshuta shel mikra, or conversely, which of them is more problematic. When one places the two options side by side, with option 1 we are asked to accept the fact that Bnei Israel did not accept the gzeirot at Matan Torah. With option 2 we are asked to accept that when God spoke the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem, it related to a prohibition against intermarriage, something that would not become law until the final years of Moshe's life, possibly 40 years hence, and the severity aspect would not surface for another 963 years. Clearly, the difficulties inherent in this second option are far more severe than those of the first option. For this reason, option 1, to the Ani Hashem Elokeichem that it is a request regarding the gzeirot, becomes the primary option. The inclusion of option 2, recorded by Rashi to address the loose ends that present themselves with the primary interpretation. And with this, we have dealt with question 6 of the set of 9 questions that were raised in part 1. We now turn to question 7, in which we ask that, as a general rule, Rashi does not identify the authors from whom he draws his pshuta shel mikra explanations to the text. Here, option 1 remains anonymous, while in option 2, he mentions that this can be traced back to Rabbi Yehuda HaNASSI. The Rebbe will argue the mentioning of Rebbe can be used to mitigate somewhat the shortcomings inherent with option 2.